Hi, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of My Blessing in Disguise 2020, a project which is a series of conversations with amazing humans whose lives have been somehow affected this year, one way or the other. And I think it's pretty safe to say that everyone has been affected somehow this year. And these people who I'm interviewing are doing really amazing things. They have turned things around. They created something new. They really reflected and looked at their lives, their businesses, and found something good in this whole situation. They found their blessings.
Mm.
So I'm your host, Basha Henderson, and today I'm bringing an amazing human, Andrew Eggelton. Andrew leads presenters from good to world class using his own unique presenting methodology. So, Andrew, I'll hand over to you instead of me just talking about who you are. You're probably best at saying who you are. Introduce yourself, tell us what you do, and what you would like us to know about you.
You were doing such a good job. And I
Thank
don't know if I've been introduced as an amazing human yet. I like that. Thank you.
you.
Quick intro. I take presenters from good to world class. I come from a presenting background, TV and actor and film. I come from production background, so behind the camera, in front of the camera. But what has always driven me is the idea of authenticity and what that truly means. What does it actually mean when you're in front of the camera? What does it mean when you're on stage? So, before COVID, before March 2020, I traveled the world and did run events in London, Los Angeles, and New York, and all over Australia. And I ran retreats in Portugal and several in Bali and Austria. So come March, and I was teaching public speakers and of course, people how to build an international speaking business. So when COVID hit, the idea of building an international speaking business was sat on its ass, and the idea of speaking in public wasn't available anymore. So there was a little bit of a meltdown. But the essence of what I teach was still there, which is a style that steps away from the technical approach, the copy and paste approach, which is the brain. Like, this is a knowledge that we already know. This is what I already know. I've stored it up here and I'm going to repeat it, which is how many coaches work, is how many presenters work. Memorize what I'm going to say. In fact, I think it's presenters' biggest fear is, what if I forget what I was going to say on stage? And I work with the heart brain. I'm fascinated, and it drives me to teach people to speak from the heart brain. Basically, what don't you know that you already know? And the energy of how to connect from the heart brain, which of course is the feeling brain. And if people are into NLP, you'll realize that about 95% of connection comes from feeling, not the speaking. So I work just as much in the space between the words as the words themselves. In fact, I think the space between the words has more potency than the words themselves.
That's really powerful, and I love your method. I experienced it firsthand. I should have mentioned that I actually have been working with Andrew for the past half a year in a group setting, in a group program, and I have been learning. So I've never done public speaking to a big group of people, which I would love to do one day. And I'm sure many people can completely understand it. Like, they fear public speaking more than death sometimes, I think. And
That's
it's been
true.
my experience. So for me, I had to start somewhere. And I'm just so happy that I came across your work and yourself actually at the end of last year, I think, because, through your method, I actually realized that it doesn't have to be as scary.
Mm,
And I don't have to memorize things, and I can be me when I speak instead of trying to pretend something that I'm not. And I think this
yes.
is at the core of what you teach, right? Like, don't try to pretend something that you're not.
Yeah, well, most people have this perception. It's their fantasy of what a presenter looks like. It's their perception of them. Normally it's them as this excited version, or this very upbeat greatest version of themselves, where everywhere they're magnetic and everybody's going to watch them and just go, oh my God, I need to watch this person more. But of course, that's not your authentic self. That's just a version of yourself. It's like a snapshot. It's taking a snapshot of you at a moment, a certain state of yourself, and then presenting that to people. And of course, you can't keep that up. And the hard part is that, I don't know about you, but I just don't wake up like that every morning. Sometimes I feel magnetic. Sometimes I'm on. Sometimes like, oh my God, I'm on today. And then sometimes I feel, oh my God, I'm off today. But I still have to work. I still have to present. I still have to, before COVID, I still have to get up and run this retreat. I still have to get up and do my keynote today in front of hundreds of people. And I'm not in that magnetic state or that hyperactive person where people just go, oh my God, he's like a ball of energy. Sometimes I'm feeling glum. Sometimes I'm down. Sometimes I'm introspective or something's happened. I'm humbled. And you have to present from that, because that is the authentic version of me right now. And that is what people are really after. It doesn't affect my knowledge or my value. It doesn't affect, everything's still there. But if I present from the authentic state, I will be able to present from my heart brain. If I go into a fantasy or perception, that snapshot, a future snapshot of what you think your greater self is, or the past snapshot being what you've known as, you're at a party once and you were just electric, or you went out on a date once and you were like, oh my God, how can this person resist me today? I'm so on. But that, unfortunately, we're just not like that all the time. And so your audience will miss you. You'll be performing on a memory or a fantasy. Ooh, you'll be performing on a memory or a fantasy, if you put it on a timeline, instead of the heart brain requires you now, you to be present, you to be, and that's authenticity to me. But it doesn't mean you're miserable. If you're down, it doesn't mean you go out and you bring your audience down. It just means you're presenting from a more probably grounded and humbled energy. It doesn't mean to say it'll stay there either. I mean, 10 minutes into a keynote and you're good at what you do, of course, well, you have some tools, the energy changes. You move, you can feel people, you can see you're touching people.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's really, I can see this that this works exactly the same way in anything in life. It's not just in presenting. I feel it works like that in life. If you try to fake it in life all the time, try to be always positive, try to change your state when you wake up, as you said, sometimes you wake up and you just feel awful, like you don't feel yourself even. And if you try to think yourself positive or act positive, you're just not being you're not getting the same results. Your clients feel it. Whereas if you start from the point where you actually are, you start to elevate when you're just like interacting with other humans and connect. And so I totally see it across everything.
You're not connected to yourself. Do you know what I mean? If you're trying to, what it's like when you do a call, or I just remember, because this was my past, the first 10, 15 years of my career, is going out on stage and the producer telling me to be more upbeat and do this stuff and just be you, Andrew, and you're going, yeah, but that's not me. That's not me. I'm not feeling like that now. And you feel like this fraud. So for an hour on stage, or whatever it is on stage, you're trying to be this version of yourself that just feels fraudulistic. You know what I mean? And you're in your head the whole time too. You can still be funny and give value, but the heart brain is not active. The heart brain is not there. And I just feel like that's the greatest gift, the heart brain, whatever you want to call, whatever you want to say the heart brain is. It's its own consciousness. It's actually, more powerful in many ways than the brain.
It
Um,
is.
and most people think this drives us, but this has a consciousness that's so much more powerful than here. And when you're working from here, I just feel like I call it, there's multiple things that I use. And one is like you become a conduit from infinite wisdom. You're tapped into this wisdom. I know we spoke about this on our call last week where we stayed on there for like maybe 2 hours and something. You know what I mean? And just chatting, and that conduit for infinite wisdom, or I often call it from an artist's point of view, when I buy someone's art, I'm buying a moment they shared with God.
I
You know
was
what I mean?
going to mention this phrase because this is one of the most powerful phrases that you use, and it, like, I connect with it, I feel like when we're speaking what you call, heart brain, I feel like you're speaking from the soul. Like some people might want to call it differently, but you're speaking from the deepest part of yourself, which is spirit, which is God, which is soul, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
A nice way to put it is, this is a finite source. Your brain is finite. It's what you currently know, which is fantastic. It's fantastic to build your keynotes or build your workshops or build your programs or steps or whatever it is. But the heart brain is the infinite source. This is the stuff that you don't know yet, but you're connected to. Or I like to say it's like the stuff that you don't know that you already know. And when that comes up for you, as an example, like just before I used the phrase memory or fantasy, when I've never said that before. I mean, I just wrote it down, and that's heart brain. I know it's not brain because I've never heard that before. Do you know what I mean? That's the difference. Is if I'm trying to use my brain all the time, I never come up with the stuff that memory or fantasy, but it'll be my new way of articulating it. And because it's come from my heart brain, it has more weight to it. It's like my essence is attached to those words. As soon as I said it, I'm able to recognize it. And now I'll do my due diligence and spend a bit of time working it into my slides or my presentation or my work and create leverage out of it. And it will always feel different. I'll feel more attached to it than stuff that I'm just repeating from up here, which becomes tiresome.
Yeah. So when you work just from your head, you go to your database, basically. So there's nothing new. You regurgitate an old stuff. And again, like, I'll bring it back to anything in life. When we want to create something, when we want to create something new, we don't do it from the head space. Fresh thought comes from the deeper space, from your infinite wisdom. And it only can happen when you actually shut off that noise in your head, this loopy habitual thinking, and you just drop to your wisdom. And your wisdom always sends you something fresh, some creative thought.
And I think that your intention is a lot too. You have to have an intention. Like the only time that I get given these words or phrases, ideas, is when I'm speaking. So essentially what I do is use the concept or the tool of speaking to discover you, to discover your deeper purpose, to discover the words, the more of you, to almost like finding the pieces of you to make you more whole as you go along. Now I use this as my tool, so I'm constantly moving forward. So if my presentations, if my keynote stays the same, like I think I said this to you once, when I do a tour, my keynote changes from city to city. Like on the plane, I will pull it apart, and through the keynote, through the last presentation, be it an event or whatever, I will recognize the points where I'm speaking and I'm going, I'm not attached to this anymore. I've moved on, and I'll realize what's next. And I have to go deeper into that work. What's next? Because I know if I keep doing that, I'll stay aligned with what I'm doing. I call that like an energetic, Yeah, an energetic business or an energetic container. It's a business or container that allows me to keep growing within it instead of my business defining me and keeping me in the same place.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful way to be, to always keep evolving and not just sticking to one thing and just, you know, it gets boring. It gets boring for you, and it gets boring for people eventually, right? Once they've heard it
Yeah.
a few times. So that's beautiful. And I love what you said, that you take people there as well. Like, you help them explore. Like, this word you always say, just go and explore deeper what it means for you, like where it even came from, and what other words you can find there, what other phrases. That's really amazing. That's powerful.
That's like, yeah, I say this like doing when you get given a word or a phrase or a sentence, and it often just feels poetic. It often comes out of your mouth and you go, that felt different. That felt different. Or even in the back of your head, or often even on stage, I will ingest, but not, maybe not. I will tell my audience, that was pretty good, wasn't it? That was pretty smart. And because I know, like, there's an absolute certainty that when it left my lips, it just felt different. It felt poetic. It felt different. It felt like it just feels different. And I can acknowledge that with my audience, because of course, when I'm speaking about it, I'm going, that was heartbreak. Now tell me that didn't feel different. You know what I mean? Now my due diligence is afterwards is going, there was a few phrases, and I will take that sentence or those words away, and then I will unpack them. And I go, what does that mean? How does that tie into what it is that I do? Like, step 3 of my method is time and space, right? Now, I just got given that. I remember just speaking on a live, and I went, it's like time and space. And it came from nowhere, and I didn't even know what it meant, but it felt right. And I was like, oh, here we go. Now, I use it as an example because it took me months to unpack. But I trusted, because it came from that place, that I had to unpack it, because it was like my future self. This is the best way of driving me to make sure I do the work. It was like my future self standing in front of me and going, I've given you your clue. You've asked for this. In some cases, people might pray for it. You know what I mean? It's like, give me a sign. And my future self is standing there and going, here's your sign. I gave you that phrase. Now, what are you going to do with it? And often people ignore it, right? They get the good idea, and then they kind of sit down with it and they go, no, it's too hard, or it's too weird, or it's too abstract. It doesn't make sense. Like, how does time and space fit into presenting? It was actually space and time. And in the end, I just became obsessed. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. Space and time, space and time. What is space and time? What to do with presenting? And then I flipped it around, time and space. It's like, oh my God. And then I had images of words living in space. And then through the heart brain, we were connected to all those words, and it started to click. And then another part came to it, was taking the time and the space between the words. And in the space between the words was that space, the galaxy where all those words lived in the space between the words that we articulate. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh, it
You're
does make sense.
you're
It
stepping
does.
into a galaxy of space with an abundance of infinity of words every time you stop talking and allow that to come to fucking hell. That was pretty good. My hairs on my legs just stood up. I'm just admiring
Take
and
your
sitting.
time. Take your time, Andrew.
I like it. It's just the concept. The concept's actually quite overwhelmingly big. A galaxy sitting in between the words and between your sentences. Oof. That was pretty good, Basia. That was pretty deep. Your audience might be probably watching this going, what the hell is he talking about? But it's when you take a concept, you see, I'm still working this out a year from when I first thought of it. And how I started using it was I deconstructed it. I created images around it. I started speaking about it. I went to a retreat. I ran a retreat in Bali, and I framed it up to everybody. And I said, look, I don't fully understand this yet, but it's powerful enough, and I understand it enough that I've actually removed my old step 3 and I've replaced it as step 3. And now it's the most powerful of all my steps, of all 5 steps: head to heart, brain. No change of state, number 1. No change of state. Head to heart, brain, second. Getting out of the head into the heart, brain. Time and space, taking the time and the space between the words. And then embodying. If you've taken the time and those words have come up, own those words, own them. Have them bone deep. You choose them. Meticulously choose them. When they leave your lips, they're yours. Own them. It feels different because your audience is looking for certainty, right? And then the last step of all is stepping into the shoes of expansion. Step 5 is expansion. Becoming that, cutting down the time frame. You have this clear vision of how it feels, what it looks like, you presenting in 10 years, bringing that to now. And going, what is the gap? What is the talent, the skills, the knowledge that I need that's in the gap between me presenting there and me right now, and filling that gap as fast as possible, meticulously as possible. And that dream scenario, that fantasy, that dream life or that scenario, that experience happens so much faster. Sorry, I went all over the show there.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I'm not surprised that really you get flown all over the world. Like, you have so many opportunities. People want you in America, and you're doing all these amazing things that, because this is so unique. This is not just about presenting. This is about really doing deep inner work. I see it, honestly. I think we talked about it in our last conversation and our last call, that you're not just a presenting mentor. I know it sounds like just a presenting. You're not just a presenting mentor. You're actually someone who helps people do deeper inner work, connect with themselves. So it's almost like a life coaching work as well that you're doing, even though you're probably not intending to.
And words, your voice is the tool.
Yes.
Yeah. And I just feel like I've spent 28 years mastering this tool, and I know what I've got out of using this tool, and now I'm teaching other people. And of course, sometimes you're ready and sometimes it takes ages. And I think even in your journey over the last half a year, you've seen people click. Katharina, for example, right now, I mean, she's just gone, oh my God, I get it. And it's shifted. Her energy's different. She's different. She's different. I see that with people all the time. There's a frustration, and it just reminds me of myself. Why am I getting it? Why aren't I getting it? And you are. Every time you practice, every time you speak about it, every time you use the method, you're getting closer and closer and closer and closer. You just don't know it. Or we're expecting this immediate result. But it's a process and it's a journey, but you're getting closer and closer all the time.
Yeah.
It is a craft.
So let's bring it back to this year.
The purpose of
the purpose of the conversation. No, I absolutely love this. This is so amazing what you're sharing here. I've learned something already today, but I want to actually bring it back to this. So okay, your business had to stop the way you were doing it this year, and you had to rethink it. You had to actually turn things around and get creative. So what happened? What's changed? And what do you see you have gained you wouldn't have done or learned if not everything that happened this year, if not the pandemic, if you didn't have to actually stop and think about it?
Just before the pandemic, I think it kind of hit most of the world. I mean, besides perhaps Italy and China, Wuhan specifically they were in January, February. But I think the rest of us, UK and Australia, New Zealand, we all kind of hit that wall in March, didn't we? And it felt like the world went down to lockdown in March. And I remember speaking in Los Angeles and then driving to the airport and Los Angeles airport, LAX, was empty. Now, anyone who's been through that airport knows that's just not how LAX works. And we got off. This is when we're like, this is real. So we get off the plane and into Melbourne. And of course, anyone who knows what happened to Melbourne, they had the world's biggest, the harshest lockdown outside of Wuhan. And we stepped out of that plane and everything was different. It's like a 16-hour flight and everything was different. Like we got off, I checked read the newspaper in the Uber, and I'm going, we're about to go into lockdown. What does this even mean? What is this idea, this concept that this first world country is going to lockdown? What do you even mean? And then we're in lockdown, and it was a bit loose at the start, and I had this meltdown. So I felt like I needed to go and have a meltdown away from the family, away from Danny. So I hired a nice place on the side of a golf course out on a peninsula. And I literally just let it all out. I just kind of rolled up into a fetal position, and it was like, wow, everything that I was building. I mean, this year I had retreats in Bali and Austria and Mexico and London and New York and Los Angeles, and I just built up Los Angeles. I'd gone there, I'd spoken, and I had built up enough people that I was about to go back and run my own event, of which then would have been the next step was a retreat, and I was going to do it in Colorado, essentially Hawaii next year. So this year just was gone. Everything that I'd been building to was gone. And after a couple of days, I just went back to, what do I do? What do I do? What is my forte here? Like, public speaking's gone, put it aside. There's still going to be people who are like, okay, then 2020, we can still practice the craft, so we're ready. And I think I noted to you, I did my first live event on 4th of December, and after 10 months off, and it was incredible how rusty I was. Just my intuition and the little tools weren't coming to me automatically. So the craft is when the tools are automatic. You don't think about them. You know what I mean? They're on a subconscious level. They just come to you when you need them. And that wasn't happening. And it was like, oh, wow. Anyone who's not practicing at the moment, 2021 is going to be a mess for them when they first get up on stage. That's nice for me to learn now. Then I realized that essentially what my first love was speaking to camera. And that was my first love. That was the thing that I strive for the most, the essence of what I do, which is authenticity, the methodology, everything still was the same. And then when I started, I realized there was there was like the golden ticket in there that, oh my God, everyone needs presenting skills right now. We're all online. And essentially what I do is I help other businesses. So no one in business really, well, businesses help other businesses, right? They solve their problems. And now businesses had a bigger problem. How the hell do I stand out right now in all this noise online? And I was sitting there and I was like, oh my God, I actually think I might be onto something. And so I sat down and I got all my Post-it notes, which I love Post-it notes, and I put them all on the wall, and I created a program called Stand Out on Video Like an Expert in 6 weeks. I put it together in, I think it was 2.5 hours. And on the 3-hour mark, I'd sold my first few people into it.
Wow.
And then we were off. The difference being, if there was a lesson this year for me though, was I was giving and giving and giving, but what fills my cup up is creativity, being on stage, entertaining. My significance, a large part of my significance comes from engaging and entertaining and communicating on stage, or in an event, or in a retreat, and for people to go, shit, he's good, and them learning from that, and me passing on all these decades of skills. And this was my learning at the end, only just lately, of my cup's not full. my cup's not full. And the other part that was emptying my cup was I was working with a whole lot of people that just weren't filling my cup as well. Do you know what I mean? It was, so in the second half of the year, it was removing. And although the income went down, my satisfaction started to rise and my happiness started to rise. And now we're nearing the end of the year. I look at the people that I work with. I look at the people that I still have in my life and I've still got relationships with that are important. Do you know what I mean? The fluff got cut away, and I got way more clear on the people that I spend time with, which is freaking, if I'm going to sit in here in an office, which is not my zone, on Zoom, I want to like these people. I want to genuinely like these people. And I'll pass on all my knowledge, but I need to make sure that my cup is filling up at the same time. Otherwise,
So important. So important to get clear, especially I think now that we're coming to the end of the year, I think everyone is somehow reflecting. And I quite like this I suppose maybe business tool to, but also for your life, to look at your 80-20, right? What's the 20%, like top 20% that really fills your cup? So like the people you love working with, or the things that you love doing, the things that, all the things that really make you feel good and be you. And then try to cut off that bottom 80%, or maybe move it from the bottom 80 to 20, and look how you could do it. So it seems like you really got clear on your 20%. And
well, it was the fear. It was the fear that if I was cutting people, I was just losing money. So, if I was going to cut those, I mean, let's be realistic, it was like 40 to 50% of people I worked with. No offense to those people who disappeared. However, what ended up replacing them was people that I connected with and I genuinely liked. And then, of course, people that it made room for people that literally people come out of the woodworks. This is where you have to trust, who wanted a one-on-one coaching every 3 weeks, but they really it was for specifically heart-brain work. They'd heard about them, they're like, Andrew, I just want to learn how to speak from my heart brain. And of course, when they're speaking their language, I'm like, oh my God, really, I can actually just teach heart brain work for the next hour and a half on this call. That's all I want, Andrew. What's it worth? And so you've ended up with the right people. And of course, when I'm doing that, I'm stretching myself, like on this interview, for example, right? It might be an exchange of time, but look how much out of this interview I got already. I got a notepad already scribbled down with things that change the way I teach.
Nice. You're welcome, Andrew.
I should be paying you, right? But can I mention one cool thing about intuition this year?
Please do.
And there was 2 defining moments this year, right? One was the birth of my son. And the second was the journey and the decision to leave Melbourne in end of April and move to Gold Coast, which anyone doesn't know, Gold Coast in Australia is like the Miami of America, just a lot smaller. And I woke up, this might be un-PC for some people, but I don't know how to describe it, because if I use the word short person, I could be speaking about my partner. He's 5'1", so I'm going to use
I'm 5 foot. I'm used to it.
Okay. So I had a dream at the end of April, and it was very clear. And I have very clear dreams or feelings. I get feelings, and they're a knowing, which is clear cognizance and absolute knowing. There is no doubt what you just realized, no doubt. And there's a bone deep belief in what you just realized. And I had this dream, and beside my bed, when I was dreaming, a dwarf stood beside my bed, and he said the words very clearly, "Don't leave it too late." And then I was going, what the fuck is a dwarf doing beside my bed? And as he walks off and he goes to close the door of the bedroom, and this is in my dream, he turns around and he gives, while I'm almost scorning it, going, what the fuck is a dwarf doing in my dream and in beside my bed? He turns around and he gives me this look. I'm being serious look. And I just knew. I woke up. I was like, okay, that's a deep knowing. If I ignore this, I'm going to get kicked in the ass. So I woke up. I said to Danny, we're leaving. She goes, where are we going? I said, we're going to the sun. We're leaving. I just know we have to leave. And I got on realestate.com that day. I found a place in 48 hours. Didn't even see it. It was 4 bedrooms. I just knew it was overlooking a lake. There was nothing. I just took it on a whim. Paid the deposit. I paid the rest of my lease to the landlord. I just knew that I had to get out of Melbourne. And within 10 days from that dream, the truck was packed up. We had a lease over here. There was a loophole still that if I had a tenancy or a lease on a place and I could show that I actually lived in Queensland, not Victoria, that I would be let through the border, right? Because they got the border patrols and it was super tight. But that was, if I had a tenancy agreement, which we had, they thought that I would be living here and not Victoria. And when I hired the rental car, because we didn't have a car in Melbourne, the lady said, would you like Queensland number plates? And I was like, oh my God, because she knew what we were doing. She goes, I'm going to give you Queensland number plates instead of Victoria.
Perfect.
They won't stop you.
No coincidences, right? Like it seems like
No.
everything just aligned. Like,
Yeah. So if you think, to paint a picture, if I hadn't listened, this is before Melbourne went into the harshest lockdown in the world. Months on end, 23 hours a day, locked up, confined in your home, no friends, no family, no one allowed to visit, only allowed to go to the supermarket and the essentials, and midwinter. And I had a baby on the way. And so we drove here 5 days through apocalyptic conditions. Remember in Australia had the fires, the bushfires? Mm-hmm. So we drove down all these back roads because we were like, this was my way of getting travel and adventure. So we took all the back roads around the lakes and the mountains, and it was all the burnt out trees from the fires and no cars on the road because it was the lockdowns. There was just nothing for hours and hours and hours. And I just remember it was the most crazy feeling. And Danny and I were looking at each other with this excitement, but this nervousness of what the hell are we doing? And what is our place like in Gold Coast where we were driving to? And we were staying in random places because hardly anything was open. No one was allowed to have anything to stay. You weren't even allowed to be out. So it was crazy. 5 days we drove, and then we got to the Gold Coast, and I got lost, and I parked up beside a lake, and Danny and I looking out at this lake, and we both looked at each other and went, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Imagine if we lived here. And then I looked up and I started to recognize this building, and I was like, oh my God, I think that's where we live. I think that's our house. That matches the picture. And I get my phone out, I'm like, oh my God, that's a picture. And I think that's our apartment. And we walk up and the guy meets us and goes, you must be Andrew and Danny. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, welcome to Queensland. Told him our story, and he was like, wow, that's big effort. And we walked up to our apartment, and it was just, Gold Coast is just like sunny every day. Winter is 21 degrees. Like winter, normal days like 20 to 22 degrees. And the sun was pouring in, and the lake was out the front, and we walked out to the front, and Danny just starts crying, the relief. I start crying because Danny's crying, and then the real estate agent starts crying because we're crying. And so happy. And it was amazing. And then the birth of our son. And if I'd have stayed in Melbourne, I wouldn't have been able to be at the birth of my son.
Wow.
I would have been segregated. And the birth of my son is hands down the greatest moment of my life. I mean, any parent will back me up. You can't even get your head around it. You know, there's a place in your heart that you didn't even know existed. You're like, oh my God, wow, have you just been cracked open?
That is beautiful. That's so powerful. And whoa, what a message. Listen to your intuition or listen to your dreams. I think like our intuition or our soul speaks to us in so many different ways. Seems like for you it's through your dreams or when you're speaking, when you're presenting. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wow.
And not to judge them, and not to judge them. Do you know what I mean? And the last part, which I'll just add and throw this in because it's super important, is that I've spent so much time with my son. I've watched them change, and they change overnight. We buggers, they change overnight. You know, you pick them up in the morning and you go, what just happened? You're different. I don't know what's happened, but you're different. And I've witnessed all these changes, and I get to play with them and hang out with them throughout the day, in between calls, in between work. I go chill out with them, and I go, I wouldn't have been here for some of this stuff. I would have been at a Mexico retreat, Bali retreat, coming back from London, you know, making money for the family, but I would have missed the stuff that I had no idea even existed. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not going to get down. I'm not going to I'll be on my deathbed and go, I really wish I didn't spend so much time watching my son grow up.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So many blessings. I've noticed, you know, there's not just one blessing for you this year. There's so many blessings came out of this situation. That could have been really, you know, I've seen so many people really, and there's no judgment. So many people are still really struggling. Their mental health took real kind of hit, and they don't see hope. But I think somehow I see that many people just thought, I'm gonna wait and see, like, and wait for this to go away, basically. And I think that was the mistake. But again, it's innocent because we all thought it might be a couple of months, maybe 3 months, and we're gonna go back to normal. But I love how you just really just changed everything because there was uncertainty. You didn't know, and then you just listened to the signs, to your intuition, and you just did what felt right. And I love how many amazing things came out of it. So I have a question. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Go for it. No, go for it.
Yeah. So I have a question. If you were to leave our like everyone who's watching with one piece of wisdom or like advice, like the most powerful thing that you've learned this year, what would it be? If you haven't said it yet today, maybe it is something you already said.
No, I have. Take ownership and take the power back for your control of over what you can control. And I'm going to give you an example of what this means. So I struggle with my mental health this year as well. Like I think like many people, and probably less than I would have if I stayed in Melbourne, but I struggled as well. And of course, you know, my greatest value is freedom, right? And my freedom was taken away. And that's how I started to feel, as if I was Australia's borders are locked down. You can't leave unless, if you've got an Australian passport. I'm a Kiwi, by the way, but Australians have to apply to leave their own country. There's no flights, you know, it's not, I think in UK, in summer, you could fly to Ibiza, and none of that was happening here. We've been locked down. And if you intend to leave, you don't come back. You're basically told you can't come back for months, you know, because you can't go on holiday. So all of that I was starting to think in the second half of the year was, and of course media was telling us the same thing, is that it'll be the second half, if not, you know, 2022 maybe, by the time our borders open and we're open again. So I'm going another year on Zoom. And another year of no freedom, another year of being controlled. And of course, I'm fighting that because I'm fighting my highest value. It's been taken away from me. And I mentioned this before we spoke. There's a man that I went to a retreat. He ran a retreat in Lake Como last year, and he's become a friend of mine, a mentor of mine. And I just saw him growing and growing. When everyone else was going in, he just went, he could afford to do that. It's not about money, but he sold his vineyard in California. He bought a retreat space on a cliff, and on Hawaii. He turned it into a retreat space. He started buying property in places that he imagined were going to boom once this. He just grew. And I remember him going, he offered me his retreat space in September in 2021, and I took it, and I just launched it today. But there was a moment where I was playing that victim. I was playing that, like, all my decisions would be taken away, and I was playing in this space very, very unlike me. I was really playing in a confined space of my blinkers were on. And I just said, look, I don't think I can make it there next year. I can't do this. And I was expecting him to go, poor Andrew, you know, let me help you out. And he just goes, okay. Like, oh man, I wanted you to come to my pity party. You know, I wanted you to meet me halfway. You know, and he goes, the plane's still flying. I was like, well, they are. I can't get out of here. He goes, okay. And that was it. And so I sat down and I went, oh my God, I'm just thinking about this all the wrong way. I've let my power being taken away, all my decisions. I'm playing a victim here. What are my options? And I started to look at my options. I was like, where can I run retreats and do my events? Okay, America's in a bit of a bad way, but they're going to recover. And if I plan it in the second half of next year, I can get excited about these events. So I was like, okay, I'm in with Hawaii. Now, the only person that needs to get there is me, because Americans can fly there. The only person that's restricted is me. Now, what happens if I pack the family up and we move to America? No, I don't want to live in America. Where else could we live? What about Mexico? What about Tulum in Mexico? That looks quite nice. So I just started Googling the top 10 places for expats in Mexico. I found Tulum. It was like number 3. And I went, okay, done. And I pitched it to my partner, Danny. And she goes, well, Leo doesn't care. And I don't think there's ever going to be a point where we regret living on a beach in Mexico for a little while. I looked at visas. I looked at starting, you know, how much it was to create a company in America, which actually wasn't as hard as I ever thought it was. All my options started to open up. As soon as my options started to open up and me make decisions, like, I'm okay, cool, we're gone. July 2021, we'll leave this place here. I've got no attachment to the Gold Coast. It was just riding out a pandemic, really. We're gone. And therefore that retreat will happen. And then as soon as I made these decisions, another person approached me and she goes, would you run? I have this is true story. I think I told you this too. This lady, she had these airplane hangars. Her and her partner own, I think it was 12 jets that are doing really well because business people are flying in their own jets to, you know, play it safe. And she goes, so you're going to be in Mexico. I have this airplane hangar. Alice Cooper is having a party in it next weekend, but I want to run a speakers academy, a boot camp. And I'm like, let's make this academy beyond just a speakers academy. Let's make this the best speakers academy in the world. Like, let's start. Now my brain's getting excited again. Now I'm like, here we go. Now I'm back. My decisions, I've got decisions again. I'm taking the power back. And then she goes, okay, cool. So we'll come and pick you up in a jet in Mexico and then bring you back into Colorado. And I'm going, okay. Do you know what I mean? The energy changed. I went from huddling in and bunkering down and fear to screw this, take the power back. What are the decisions that I can make that they are dramatic? You know, they are dramatic, but what do you have to do to make it work for you right now? Do you know what I mean? It's dramatic, but I know it's right because the energy changed and the opportunities came back. And it felt right.
Mm. And that's why I said, yes, you shared this story with me about this lady. And that's why I said, you know, I'm not surprised that people want to fly you from place to place to teach at their retreats, because you are really world class, you know. And what I really want to say, what came up for me as you were sharing this, you said that this year your highest value was compromise, the freedom. You didn't have freedom to do things. And it sounds to me like you actually connected with your like you found your freedom inside, because I think what I see, what I'm really starting to see recently is that everything we have in our reality out there, we project from the inside. So if you feel freedom on the inside, you have a freedom on the outside. Like, it doesn't matter if there's pandemic, it doesn't matter what happens, you find your freedom inside and you connected with it. This is what I took away from what you just
I think that's a nice thing to take out of it. You have to really think outside the box at the moment. And I think, I can't even get into my head what it must be like, the fear if you're watching TV or radio. And I know there's, lots of people, I don't know if it's all you people in the UK, but I just know that generation of like Danny's parents or my parents' generation, they have news on all day, 24/7. And I go, how much fear must you be living in? And I know that some of it we have to be really careful. There's obviously our personal, what we have to do to be personally responsible about this. But there's also imagine if I just sat here and I was like, okay, we're going to ride this out for the whole of 2021. And I felt like this, but I don't have to feel like this. Do you know what I mean? Think you're going to start breaking that, get out of the control and go, what can I control? What can I control? How do I get my happiness? The other thing, Basia, that I'm doing next year, starting early January actually, is I'm renting an event space out once a week for me just to train, for me to go in and do what I love, work on my keynote, work on my talks, listen to music. What kind of music do I want to play in these places? Create because I create my own music, right? Well, I use that very loosely. I guess somebody steal for me, but I create original music to go with my guided journeys or meditations. To work out what visuals I want, work out my pacing, my timing, all the little subtleties. So when my time comes next year, I'll be sharp and ready, because the last thing I want to do is get an opportunity after going all through this and get on stage in America and not fail, but not knock the ball out of the park. I want to walk on that stage so fucking confident that I swing and I hit that ball out of the park. And I know that I have. Do you know what I mean? I want to have that confidence, that certainty, that confidence coming out of my pores. So the person who gave me that opportunity, who employed me, comes back. Do you know what I mean? And more opportunities arise. And just for myself, just to go, see, look what you did.
That's really inspiring. That's really inspiring. And I hope everyone will find something for themselves from this. So much gold in this interview and everything you shared today with us. Thank you so much, Andrew. So just before we end, I want to say thank you so much for joining me, for giving us, like my wider community on Facebook, this gift of sharing your story and everything, like what you learned and your wisdom. Before we go, I would like to ask you where people can find you if they want to work with you or explore, learn from you.
Sure. Like I have a Facebook community called The Heart of Presenting. It's like my office. It's my virtual office. I go in there and I present, I give tips and tools and have fun. And of course, AndrewEggelton.com. But I recommend the Facebook group. It's a good community.
It's a nice space. I'm part of this group, and I love the regular challenges, Facebook Live challenge that you do there every few weeks. I love it. I participated, and I always learn so much, and just so many people I connected with through your community. So I encourage everyone, invite everyone to join. Everyone who's interested in this kind of in learning presenting, or just connected with awesome people anyway.
The challenge, I take people through my the first 3 steps of my presenting method.
Thank you, Andrew.
And Basia, I want to say that you're an amazing human being too, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for seeing me. To everyone who's watched us, thank you for watching. If you are inspired to share your story, get in touch with me. Feel free to share any questions you have, any thoughts, any insights below this conversation in the comments. And if you have something that you've seen, if you found your blessings, feel free to share them on your Facebook, on your profile through Facebook Live or through text with a picture, and drop a hashtag there, My Blessing in Disguise 2020. Let's make it viral. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.